Capital Gains Tax Solutions podcast, where we believe most high net worth individuals and those who help them, they struggle with clarifying their capital gains tax deferral options. Not having a clear plan is the enemy. Using a proven tax deferral strategy such as the deferred sales trust is an amazing way to exit highly appreciated multi-million-dollar exits, defer capital gains taxes so you can create and preserve more wealth, or help your clients, friends, and family do the same. We're also streaming on expert CRE secrets as well. So appreciate all of the commercial real estate people out there listening and learning. And so each episode, by the way, my name is Brett Swarts. For those who don't know me, in each episode, I'm joined by some of the best real estate, financial, wealth, and business minds in the world, where they share their ideas, deal stories, and secrets so we can create and preserve more wealth, and also figure out ways to create passive wealth and level up in business. Please welcome to the show with me. Well, actually, before I announce who we have with the show, I had the pleasure to meet this gentleman at a large event, and he was one of the keynote speakers on stage. He's the Chief Revenue Officer for S2A Modular, and in his role, he leads the execution of the company's corporate strategic plan, including the growth of different business verticals, customer segments, joint venture partnerships, and communicating the company's environmental, social governance, and so much more. He has a massive amount of experience in real estate, raising capital. Please welcome to the show with me, Dene DeLisle. Dean, how are we doing?
Good. How are you doing?
I'm fantastic. And for our listeners getting to know you for the first time, would you give us a little bit more about your story and your current focus?
Yeah, for sure. So I've been raising capital for, well, now I'm going to date myself. I'll go back a little bit. I started at Merrill Lynch in 1982. But what's interesting is people go, "Oh, were you a trader on the floor?" or things like that. And I was actually in computer operations back in 1982. So you can only imagine, those of you that are a little closer to my age, or those of you that have studied technology in school. We started transmitting trades way back then on punch cards, and I was part of the original team that actually took and automated all those systems. We set up, for the first time ever, internet transmissions, imagine that, back in 1982, of all the money and all the trades. And I was fascinated by the fact, I was a tech guy, but I was fascinated by watching all the money move throughout the world. And so going from this very manual process to this very systemized process, and from that moment forward, I literally, I was at the age of 20 when I created some of those systems with my counterparts. And then I fast forward about 3 years later, I exited and started my own tech company and started to learn how to raise capital for myself. And then I started, my family had done a lot of real estate and construction, and I had fast forward, just decided, well, I should always buy real estate or be part of real estate. So I started investing very early on in real estate, asking people for money very early on. And my dad was a consummate salesman, even though he was in manufacturing and he was a shop teacher in high school. He always had side hustles for sales. And so we grew up in a sales environment where he was always selling something, right? So a lot of that rubs off in terms of, you have to knock on so many doors, you have to, make so many calls to convert things. And so when I started taking the science of raising capital, growing a business, driving revenue, I always equated it to top line marketing and sales. Now think of back then, early in my career, the internet, as we know it, didn't exist. There were no websites, no digital. Faxing hadn't even been invented yet. It was very early on. So I was there for just about every technology chapter that you can imagine in terms of what we now call digital marketing. And so I have raised money for a lot of companies, a lot of offerings during that span of my career, mostly real estate related offerings, if you will. Some of my tech companies I raised capital for. And so I was in the habit of creating offerings and building a network and really building trust with people enough to have them give me capital and make some good strategic investments. And so about 22 years ago, almost exactly to the day, I created a company called Forward Progress. And that company was a digital marketing company And we were early adopters. I've always been one of those risk taker early adopters on the tech side, of course, because like I said, I was there for, good old fax blasting, for those of you remembering that. And when email marketing started out, it was on DOS, there was no Windows, there was no cloud, there was nothing like that. So now all of a sudden you start looking at, the digital age started coming and maturing. And so we were early adopters for social media, for advertising digitally and things like that. So always found ways to get a very good crafted message for raising capital or driving revenue into an organization, and leveraging all the tools of the internet to do that. And back then we were more revenue focused than capital focused, because back then you couldn't technically raise capital. You had to do it through private offerings and road shows and closed hotel rooms and disclosures and things like that. And then over the last 10 years, the SEC has changed the rules. And if you have a Reg A, Reg D, or Reg CF, you can pretty much go to market with your regulated offerings through the SEC and raise capital from accredited investors. So we took a methodology that we created decades ago and just kept perfecting it, and now have a very proven success formula for not just raising capital for ourselves, but raising capital for many, 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 many clients. And Brett, as I mentioned, we're at a good success clip of about 50 to 70 million a month accredited investors, retail and investing, and people just shake their heads like you and go, what? You do what? How do you do that?
Amazing. Absolutely amazing. By the way, so we have this, one to let all our listeners know, if you want to take action right now, you go to s2amodular.com, because with that itself, that could be the entire episode, s2amodular.com. And what I'm hearing, Dean, is you have sage advice on technology, marketing, business, capital, movement, which I think is such a unique skill set that I don't even know that can be duplicated unless you had someone next to you doing the same things, because you went from the age of, pre-fax to where we are today. And by the way, probably never to be duplicated ever again, because we're forever, past the prehistoric times, if you will.
Prehistoric, there you go.
So, but I want to dive right into the topic, which, by the way, we're talking about how to raise 50 million a month retail from accredited investors. So, Dean, let's dive right into this. What would you say is the number one secret to be able to raise such massive amount of capital from accredited investors?
Well, excellent. But before, I want to set a little context before we do that. So S2A Modular is where I currently sit as a chief revenue officer. About 3.5 years ago, I found someone, a nice young man like yourself, Brett, to run my company that raises all the capital, the digital marketing company. And I decided and I had been through 5 IPOs, and it was my time to take a startup to IPO. So I found an opportunity with S2A Modular. I had known one of the co-founders and the CEO, Brian Custis, for over 20 years, helped him with, dozens of offerings that he had done on real estate, successful offerings. And then I decided it was time for me to walk the walk, right? I needed to go into a company, raise capital at a retail level, turn on the machine, and see if I could do it from the inside out, so I could then speak to other founders and revenue officers with the system. So just wanted to set context that Forward Progress is that marketing company, forwardprogress.net, and S2A Modular is where I sit today, actively raising capital. And now I've raised 70 million in capital, and I'm going, we just moved into a $450 million institutional raise. And what I want to tell people is how we bridge that with the same system. So backing up to your question, what advice, or people are like, where do you start? And I don't want to sound like a broken record, because when I was at the conference, I was laughing because everybody was up there talking about your plan. You got to build a plan. How long have we been hearing that, Brett? Every time you go to start up a business, Well, over the decades, I became frustrated, and I would get paid 50, 75, $100,000 to build a substantial plan for a company, but it was so overloaded and overbearing. By the time the plan would launch, I literally would people just didn't work at the company anymore. It was like that big. They were like big, thick plans. And I'm like, this is crazy. I go, there's certain elements and certain things that you can whittle down to just do that are basic functions. And so what we figured out is we could go into a company, see what they had, see what they were doing, look at their people, look at their story, and then boil it down to the bare bones of what we needed to perfect, maybe make look better. Maybe, maybe they didn't have structured marketing. Maybe they didn't have organized stories for the founders and things like that. But how could we take what they had, improve on it, and then build trust in a marketplace and educate a marketplace to get people to invest, right? So I always say, build trust and, convert, right? So it's really a two-step process, but there's a lot of things that go into that. So yes, you do have to build a plan, but it doesn't have to be this overbearing, massive plan. So some of the key components, you want me to go into that?
But let me just capture that, because I think this is really important. Then we'll go into the key components. And so we're talking with Dene DeLisle. By the way, it's spelled DeLiale.
No, SLE, DEL.
I'm sorry. My SLE. I'm sorry. My other screen is just too small. So I gotta get this.
That's okay. That's okay.
I gotta put these glasses on. Okay. So yes, DELISLE. Okay. And so you can go to s2amodulator.com. And so if I'm hearing you, it sounds like the insight and expertise of looking at something that someone already has in place, right? If you want to actually, optimize and get this thing moving, have, yes, some sort of a plan, but the point is improve on what they already have, and then immediately take some action to build, to work on building that trust and improving it. Is that a fair, just little segment of what you said?
Yeah. And to have a button down plan put together. And I had created something decades ago with my frustration of these big plans of going to market, raising capital, because people would come in and extort folks for a couple $100,000 just to build a plan, not even to build out the digital assets. So we were like, well, that's crazy. It's not required. So most founders don't know how to tell their story, especially if you're in the tech space. They just don't know how to do it. And even in the other markets, we just found medical, real estate, doesn't matter. They just don't know how to tell their story. And one thing I want to tell you is, how you said you have to put your glasses on to see. A lot of people are not transparent in their storytelling of the founders. And a lot of founders, for whatever reason, are ashamed for telling their story, which is what I wrote this book for. It's called The Street Guide to Digital Business Influence. It's called First. And what I talk about in there is I'm like, every one of us are unique. We're all different, and people invest in people, and they need to trust the people that are part of that organization. But in order to do so, they need to know they're genuine, authentic, and they need to know their story. They need to connect to that story. So, some people connect because they went to the same universities, they played the same sports, they have the same hobbies, maybe they drink the same color wine, whatever it is out there. People connect at different points, with different people. And so, as I meet people and as you meet people, what I always say is, look at the human side of the person that you're meeting, that you're going to ask for capital, and see if there's any commonalities, things that are common. Now, what's important too is when you're doing think about the simplicity of when you look at the bios of the founders and you look at the website and you look at the social media profiles, the LinkedIn profiles, and they might be on Facebook or Instagram or whatever. It needs to be consistent. One of the biggest trust breakers are when people read the deck or they read the website with the bio, and it's written in this voice that is completely different than when I Google your name on the internet and I find a whole different story about you. And they're like, why did they leave this out? They create doubt in people, right? So now there's this whole gap in the trust building process for when I'm going to ask someone for capital. And they're just like, oh, now all of a sudden their guard's up, and it just makes it a whole lot harder. So tell an authentic story of yourself. Make sure your bio is concise and to the point and has key elements of success, your background, and what's important for people to know about you that you're asking to invest. And then make sure it's consistent all over the internet. I write about the good, the bad, and the ugly in my book. I tell my whole story in here about the good times and the bad times. I just don't gloss over with everything that's been great, but I've been through, all kinds of situations, and I tell people about it and I'm authentic about it. And then people go, wow, me too. I feel that, I get that. And now they trust you and they want to do, and then they're hungry to do business with you. Even if they can't write you a check, they find someone to write you a check. It's the most unbelievable process. I almost can't even, describe it.
Okay, so this is phenomenal, right? Because I think you're right. As business professionals, as someone who's on a podcast, like even the first time I got on the podcast or started the business and went all in on social media, there's times you're like, yeah, you share the story and be vulnerable, and then you share the highlights, and there's the tension, right? There's the tension, and so what you're saying is making sure you're hitting the key elements of not only success but also the challenges or things you went through, so people can connect with you emotionally, right? Because you're right. The biggest thing I found is I try to practice this. Like, let me tell you where it started, right? Because if you're going to help someone move to the next level, whether that be investing with you or if you're coaching them, they've got to know that, hey, this person was once where I was, and now they might be, at a different level, but I need to know that emotionally, they can understand where I'm coming from. Otherwise, it just looks like a superhero, right, Dean? And they're just going, I can never be Superman or superhero, right? Is that an essence of what you're saying?
Yeah. And it doesn't even have to be super sometimes. It just has to be real. And I always call it, and then what you want to do is connect that to the brand that you're working so hard to sell and to put on the internet. And I call it humanizing the brand, because now you have people that make up that brand, and it's not just this thing that you're raising money for, but it's a human element. And that's how people connect to one another. That's how we connected right at the conference. So there's this human element where you feel like, I have to go meet Dean. I have to go meet Brett. I have to know more about that person as a human. And then I'm going to trust them. And I trusted you so much, I didn't even look up your podcast and now I listen to it, now I'm a fan, but it's like, I didn't even double check. I just knew I liked you from the moment we connected and met. And we just had a brief conversation at the conference, right?
It makes sense. That was a great point, right? I mean, and honestly, I think I also say it's always my favorite part of whatever we're doing is like learning the story of somebody, like my client or customer, friend, whoever it is, right? Understanding like a challenge and then connecting with them beyond the business part of it. It's all of the other things that make business and commerce enjoyable, right? And it makes sense and it's so natural in person, but you're right. Once it goes digital or once it goes online, it does seem like it's a whole nother set of glasses and even like a different dialect of how to connect emotionally. So I think what we're talking about here is how to connect emotionally digitally. And then I think the key you said there, connecting it to the brand. So what's the secret to doing that? Because even if I understand the first piece, how am I going to weave that into the brand, Dean?
Well, think about it. There's always a founder that created the brand. How was the brand born? It has a story too, right? And if you can put that in alignment and tell that story, and many times it's a very passionate story. It's an emotional story of how that brand came to be, of where it's at. Maybe it was out of demand, maybe it was out of trauma, whatever it was. It's a human, there's core human needs that all of a sudden attach people and make them raving fans. One of the things we pride ourselves in is once we can humanize that brand and bring those humans forward and create a reality of authenticity with them, now all of a sudden you have people that don't just want to help you with the capital raise, but they want to bring you clients and generate revenue for the business. So now you're a revenue generating machine on top of a capital raising machine, but you built that trust through the story and connection with the humans and the brand.
Fantastic. Okay, so that's step one. Step two. Now let's imagine step three. If you've accomplished that, what's like maybe some of the tactical stuff to get this stuff out, to get this machine? Like 50 million a month is a big number, right? So what's gonna get that plane off the ground and going 100 miles, 500 miles an hour?
Yeah, and again, you walk before you run, right? So we always, a lot of people are familiar with this that have raised capital, but you test the waters, right? So you test the waters, which is a methodology for raising capital where you just test your network. But one of the things we didn't tap into is that I love, and I have a whole chapter dedicated to this, chapter 3, on what I call building your social team. So I call it, but really we all know it as building your network. Now, if you remember, I always laugh about this and guilty as charged myself. When everybody first got on LinkedIn, it was like the race to 5,000 connections, right? It was like, oh, how many connections do you have? And it's like, and then then Facebook was the same thing. How many friends do you have? But are they really friends? And did you just like massively connect to everybody in the world in hopes that you would have a marketing machine? But it's a disconnected, non-humanized machine because it's cold. It's basically now you're infringing on people and throwing stuff at them, whether they have an interest in doing business with you or not. And it had a big negative effect on folks, to the point where today people prune all their connections to get rid of all those people. Like, that's an active effort that's been going on for almost a decade now, thinking about how old social is. And so what I always say is, I'm like, well, everybody in the company that's a founder and the brand has a network, right? And we said, what if you treated that network like it was truly an empowered team of people, just like a sports team? Brett, who's your favorite team?
Oh, San Francisco 49ers.
There you go. I'm Chicago Bears, right? So, and hopefully both of us do well, not against each other, but we both do well. So in building, and I studied teams. In Chicago, we had a lot of successful teams. I was part of the Michael Jordan era, that whole thing. And so, so you start looking at successful teams, and we've had a lot of unsuccessful teams over the years. So I've studied both, the Cubs, the Sox, good years, bad years, all those. And so you start looking at what are the traits of those teams. Well, it's about a unified field. It's about everybody working together and feeling like they're helping each other along the way, not just people helping you and your brand, but you helping others. And they need to feel that mutuality in that effort of communication, care, and things like that. And I don't want to get too deep into being a good customer service person and things like that. But, a lot of that stuff wraps together a business fundamentals, but it's actively selecting a core network for each of the officers, and then each of the directors, and then the employees, and getting everybody to really talk the same way about a brand and tell the story about the brand, and the founders the same way. And if you can get to that basic, simple science and pass that on to that network that you have, those people are going to bring others. Because we know that now with social media and the internet, we're more like 2 to 3 degrees apart from all the people we could ever possibly want to know on this planet, rather than 6 degrees of separation. So think about that. If you could, I call it the ideal 40 for each person. If you could get people to just be connected to 40 ideal people, whether they're part of the capital raise, or they're part of production, or they're part of, whatever their role is, to connect to 40 like-minded people that were helping each other out. And you start doing the math. And even if you only have 20 people in that company, and you start multiplying that out by 2 degrees, you have a foundation for not just raising capital, but generating business, goodwill, and a fan base that is going to continue to bring you people. And I can tell you an actual effect from S2A when I stepped in and did this is we only marketed in the US. And now, in less than 3 years of my efforts and the team's efforts together, we now have over a dozen countries that are begging us to give us hundreds of millions of dollars to build factories in their countries to rebuild cities. I get emails every day from different countries. Please pick us, select our country. We have the money, we have the government backing. We need you. Think about that.
Wow. I'm blown away, Dean. And oh my goodness. I think, we need to do like maybe 2 or 3 episodes, because I feel like we just scratched the surface,
Well,
right?
we can pick different segments, right? But that's,
yeah, I
and
mean,
you can tell I'm passionate about this because I've been doing it my whole life. But it's like I took it from the old days of doing this manually, the old fashioned way, like handshake to handshake, face to face, and then digitizing it, which I was just like blown away at how fast and effective it could be.
It's amazing. Yeah. I think the unique sage advice, I'm one of those ones that when we grew up, we knew before the internet, and then, we're the ones that the internet kind of came along, 83 born, right? So we remember the days where we were still a kid, where we spent a lot of time on computers, but we also remember the time when there was really no computers. My dad bought one of the first Apple computers. We were in Silicon Valley, and I remember playing with it the first time, maybe like at 5 or 6, whatever it was. I think right around there, 7 maybe. And then all of a sudden, internet kind of came around during high school, even like email. Like got the first Hotmail account, that was a big thing. Anyways, but the point is, I feel like because of your wisdom of having both sides and being able to see it all, you've been able to continue that connection, that emotional connection with the digital, which it's not easy to do. So goodness. I want to have you back on a second podcast, because we are up against the top of the bottom of the podcast here. So can we? I do want to deliver that one thing we did say. So what is maybe the one thing after you've established some of these things, Dean, to get that machine just like going at a pace, right? That is going to produce such a large amount in a given time. Maybe not 15.
Well, and don't think large amount, think the needed amount, right? Because everybody's raise is different. It could be a $10 million raise over the course of 6 months or whatever it is. We raise that $50 million a month for a variety of folks. It took us a year and a half to raise 70 million, but it was a good 70. And now we've raised over 3 billion in revenue pipeline out of that same effort. Now we have a $3 billion pipeline in the institutional round that we're doing. We just started. So we have no cold call meetings for our institutional investors for 450 million. So I want you to hear that clear, because you do it right in the beginning, and it should build momentum so that you have sales and you have the next round handled, and et cetera, et cetera. It should have that net effect. But in order to do it, have a realistic digital budget. And we always walk people through up front what it's going to take. And sometimes they have to go get that money. And, sometimes they ask their network for that money. Sometimes they have it, or they pull it from an existing budget. Just have a realistic budget for the amount of money you're looking to raise. And if it's a small raise, it's a smaller budget. If it's a big raise, it's going to be a bigger budget, right? It's like anything. Even selling a big ticket item, costs more to sell a car than it does a pen. It's the same.
So if I wanted to raise 100 million, what would be a good percentage, just ratio roughly?
I'd say about 10%.
Okay. So if you want to raise 100 million, you need to have a 10% budget towards the systems, the marketing, the advertising, or how are you advertising? I mean,
we're advertising, we're doing social PR, we're incorporating all that, but it doesn't have to be ours. We incorporate and use whatever systems. Like when I walked into S2A, they already had a PR firm, so we use their PR firm. They already had social media folks, so we use their social media folks, and they had a CRM, we use their CRM. So we're not looking to replace anything. We're just looking to augment it with best practices and apply these principles and fundamentals that I just spoke about, telling the story, letting people know it's a human brand, that we're on a mission, and attract other people that are on that same mission in alignment with us, and then they continuously bring you more people.
Absolutely amazing. Dene DeLisle. You can find more by going to A2A Modular.
S2A.
S2A. Gosh, that's the third time I said it. I'm so sorry. And S2A modular, guys. Don't do the A. You're gonna remember it now because I did it 3 times. S2A modular .com. And Dean, is it too much to ask to have you back on where we can even dive even deeper into this?
You just tell me which chapters you want me to cover, what sections,
Okay.
and just to let you know, this is a powerful thing too, Brett, is that a lot of founders and people that are raising capital are afraid to let their network know, and they're afraid to ask. So those are 2 things we can cover very specifically. Those are 2 things that I've coached hundreds of thousands of people on. I've taught it in universities, but a lot of people wait for the perfect moment. They wait for the perfect amount of time to start telling people they're even gonna raise capital. And that their time is money. It's don't hide it, just like your story. Don't hide your story. Don't hide the fact you're raising capital, and don't hide the fact that you need it, and tell people. So we're closing out our retail round. The last of the retail is going to close out at S2A Modular, so you can peek at us and get an active view of what that looks like. And now we're going institutional, which is my dream. And my goal is to IPO in the next couple of years, and hopefully I'm back on this show talking about that.
Well, let's check it out. By the way, your 5 IPOs, let's do that real fast, right? When you exited, Dean, well, I mean, capital gains tax, like what happened, and what was it painful, or did you have a great plan in place, or what I mean, you're in Illinois. Yeah. I'm California, where I'm originally from, and there's New York, New Jersey. We're the toughest 4 states in the country. So talk about real quickly, a little bonus here. What was your strategy there? What did you do?
Well, the secret is now I live in Indiana, which is just outside of Illinois. So that has a much better system. But yeah, no, it took me a lot of trial and error, and I didn't trust people, and I was afraid to ask, right? The right people for advice. So always ask and get references on the best people that can help you through those things, and ask your network, right? Whether you have a successful uncle, or you have a colleague that you've known, or a previous boss, don't use your network, man. Everybody has been through the good, the bad, and the ugly, and you don't need to suffer every one of those trials and tribulations to find the right person, to find the right pathway. So, I've done it right and wrong. I'm not proud to, I'm not too proud to tell you I've made a lot of mistakes, and that creates success.
I think that's the wisdom right there. There's a lot of quotes here, but like, we don't need to suffer the pain of having to learn it ourselves. We have a network. Don't be afraid to ask. Don't be afraid to ask your network, dig in, find the people, ask the right questions. It's okay to not know. Because you can face regrets if you don't, and especially if you do it yourself and you mess it up. So don't be afraid to ask, plan. Wow, we're out of time, Dean. I'm gonna bring it back on for our listeners one last time. I'm gonna let you say it. If they want to find you, what's the best 2 places to find it? And also plug the book too. I know you have a book.
Yeah. S is in Sam, the number 2, A is in Adam, modular.com is where I'm actively working as the Chief Revenue Officer. Forwardprogress.net is the company that raises 50 to 70 million a month retail with our systems. And the book on Amazon is called First, or you can plug my name in. I'm writing the 2nd book right now on some of the things we just talked about. But it's really about how I grew up on the street and created this went from the street to the digital side of raising capital and generating revenue.
Amazing. Thank you, Dean. Thank you. I want to encourage you to keep using your gifts and talents of being a risk taker and an early adopter, but also being able to connect with people and help other people connect with people and networks, and raise capital and make a difference on this planet. Thank you so much for your passion, your story. You're going to be back. I can't wait till you come back. We'll probably give a little bit of time for us to digest everything. But thank you so much. And I also want to thank our listeners for listening to an episode of the Capital Gains Tax Solutions podcast. We're also streaming Expert CRE Secrets podcast, where we believe most high net worth individuals and those who help them, they struggle with clarifying their capital gains tax deferral options. Not having a clear plan is the enemy, and using a proven tax deferral strategy such as the deferred sales trust, or connecting with someone like Dean to help you build systems to raise capital to make a difference is an amazing way to create and preserve more wealth. If we could be of any service to you for exiting any highly appreciated asset of any kind, please go to capitalgainstaxsolutions.com, and also check out our book as well. We just came out with a book We have like Kevin here from Shark Tank in the book. It's called Building a Capital Gains Tax Exit Plan. Take a look at that. Please rate, review, subscribe, share this one. It can be inspirational to someone out there. Thank you so much.